Welcome to the Zeitgeist. My name is Ryan and I am delighted to be talking to you about our growth playbook designed specifically on how to scale agency businesses. So first things first, I'm obviously acutely aware of how hard it is out there. An ongoing pandemic, variety of lockdowns and tiers and God knows what. It's hard. It's 3 or 4 or 5 times as hard as it would be in a normal year. That said, there is a huge opportunity still for businesses to thrive and indeed still grow despite what's going on out there. So really the question that we have to ask is, are we making the most of your business's potential? What we do know is growth is hard in any shape or form. Startups are hard, scale-ups are hard, and established businesses that are looking for that next gear, it's all hard. And no matter what you do, whatever your specialism is, the key thing that's hard about this is that growth and managing a business day to day are not natural bedfellows. Growth that requires new energy, new mindset, potentially investment, and a lot of human capital and energy to try and drive that business forward. Balancing that with managing cash flow, keeping clients happy, are we delivering quality? These two things do not sit together. So without the right kind of focus, it becomes even harder. And I'd like to help with that. I've got a few tricks, tips, techniques, and we'll talk you through the framework that I use to help you drive your business forward. Or at least this playbook's going to help you drive it forward. A little bit about me. I have been around the block a couple of times. I have been an agency founder. I've sold my business a couple of times, and I've worked with a variety of different brands and agencies as a growth advisor to try and help them understand what their growth agenda looks like. So I've had a really privileged view of trying to understand what makes businesses tick. The thing that makes it tick ultimately is about generating revenue. Whether you've got investment or not, if you can't get that business into a revenue generating mode, we haven't got a business that we can grow. And throughout my career, I've generated way in excess of £100 million of sales revenue that has driven these businesses to growth. And I'm really proud of the businesses that I've been able to do that with. Some of which have got 500,000 employees, some of which have got 5 employees. The problems are always the same, no matter where you are. And through working with these fantastic businesses, it's given me the opportunity to work with some really outstanding brands, selling them into services for each of these businesses and helping build those into accounts and genuinely understanding, through these relationships, what makes these brands tick and what it is that they're trying to buy from suppliers, because they do need specialists to help them move their businesses forward. So today I describe myself as being like Yoda on Luke's back. Hopefully slightly taller, but probably as good looking. And what I really try and do is help guide, steer, advise businesses to take that next step, to drive their business forward, to take that leap. But ultimately it's about trying to drive these business leaders and owners to realize their ambition. Because without any ambition, your business isn't going anywhere. You need to have the drive, the ambition, and the mindset, which we'll come on to talk about, because mindset is the thing that's really going to be at the core of everything that we do. So let's have a look at the framework itself. From a high level, we've got this gobstopper model. And I've mentioned mindset a couple of times already, but it does sit at the heart of an effective growth strategy. If your head is in the right place, if your attitude is right, and you've got the right ambition and drive, we're off. And that is really one of the key catalysts that we'll see throughout these frameworks. So we've got the mindset. What comes next is strategy. We know where we want to go, and we can build an effective roadmap to help us get there. Brilliant. We've got the drive. We've got the plan. Value proposition. What is it that we're selling? And I'm not talking about saying, here's a list of services, would you like to buy them? I'm talking about how we can devise a proposition that adds value to the client relationships, solves problems for the brands that we're trying to work with. Once we have the value proposition locked down, we need to understand how to get the message out there. With go-to-market, we're combining sales and marketing together properly to ensure that we've got an effective and lean sales machine that can help us generate awareness and ultimately close deals, because it's all about closing deals. Layered on top of that, without existing account growth, no business is going to grow. You can't keep filling the hopper with new deals and growing that way. It's just unsustainable. So account development becomes an incredible part of our growth phase. Finally, culture. It's all well and good business leaders and founders having the mindset for growth. But if we can't take our teams on the journey, you might as well quit now. So we have to wrap our strategy with the culture, the drive, the empowerment, the autonomy within the team, so we have a shared culture that can drive things forward. Let's get into some of the specifics. So firstly, let's look at the overarching strategy. Now, I know you're all thinking, you've seen a business model canvas a million times. This is slightly adapted, but in theory, it's no different. But it's about the mindset that we want to apply to this. So what is our strategy? What are we trying to achieve, and in what time frame? Is it 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 3 years, whatever it may be? What does that look from a revenue perspective? What do we need to do monthly? Are we looking to do a merger, acquisition? Are we trying to diversify a client base? Are we trying to build profit? Are we trying to build IP? Like, what is the strategy going to be? Like, take a step back from your business. Work on the business, not in the business. Next is our offer. Now, clearly, this is a precursor to the value proposition design, but let's have a look at what we think we do. And let's also look at the segments in terms of where we think we sell stuff. So are we selling stuff into one sector where there's an adjacent sector, completely different with no experience, but got the same problems that we can jump into? Let's do that kind of high level analysis and planning and try and put that on our roadmap. Themes. What are we solving? What are we talking to our clients about? What are we good at? What are we passionate about? Let's try and surface that, beyond just a very simple service list. Then it's into quick wins, because every strategy should have some quick wins. What can we do quickly to get us onto the starting blocks of this roadmap? And which channels are then going to do that? What's going to be most appropriate for us? And how do we apply a set of tactics to start to enable some of these channels, some of these quick wins, but also the overall strategy itself? Now, underpinning this, we need to understand what our win themes are. How do we win work? How do we stand out against the competition other than a creative proposal or what we do? What are the levers that we're going to pull because we know that's going to be a trigger point with clients? But also, which levers are we going to pull to try and close those deals? How can we convince that client through a sensible commercial message to come with us? So that sets the foundation. Next, we can talk about value proposition. The thing with value proposition is, and I've said it a few times, this is not about a service list of things that you can do. We don't want to tell people what we sell. What we want to try and do is educate them in terms of how we can solve their problems, because that's where we start to add the most value. And by knowing what we're good at, we can then start to make that incredibly clear to the people who are potentially going to buy it, linked to the value that we create, and that should all drive growth. First things first, we need to know what we do. So on the left-hand side of here, we need to undertake a mapping exercise. What do we do? What do we sell? What sits in our verticals? What are we selling lots of? What are we not selling? Where do we sell these things to? How do we build a picture of our business and how that comes to life? Then the next part of this is about understanding how that matches against the competition. I like to go through a number of these different graphs and just iterate on a load of different axes just to try and get different perspectives to see how we can start to get cut through. But importantly, what we're trying to understand is who is there, who's going to eat our lunch on a day-to-day basis, and then who potentially are the challenges that are coming through the market that we need to watch. Once we've had a look at what we're currently doing and who we're going to be talking to in terms of competition, competing against, we then need to have a look at some boundary mapping, because what we really want to do is a deep dive and understand truly what is under the bonnet of our business. But also with boundary mapping, and the thing that I love most is about working out what we're not. By working out what we're not, it really elevates and magnifies exactly what it is that we're good at, and we can really hone in on that message. So the pink inner circle is what we are really good at today, or what we'll continue to be good at, and what we want to be known for. The middle concentric circle with the pink post-its is about our ambition. Where are we going? What do we want to add to our proposition? What is the logical next step for us within the time frame of our strategic roadmap? Then the outer ring is about understanding who we're not. How big do we not want to be? What does too big look like? What does too small look like? Do we want to avoid business models like contra deals or equity deals, for example? What is the culture? What do we ensure that we don't want to be? Do we want to be too informal? Do we not want to be too formal? Let's work out the contrasting side of these different equations so we can get laser focus on exactly who we are. Once you've worked out who we are, we can work out what our clients' problems are. Do some analysis, speak to your team, work out a big backlog of problems that we think that we see in the market. Speak to clients, speak to prospects. But by doing this process, we can then start to find some general themes and then start to build our themes within our business. So we can then start to drive out what our primary, secondary and tertiary focuses are as far as building out our business. Now, when we get to the theme setting, we can compare and contrast problems versus solutions. And now we're solutions orientated, and we can start to map out exactly what we do as a business to make sure that we're bringing value into that relationship. And beyond that, we can then start to design the proposition. So we carry all of those ideas over into our pyramid. Principles are the values that we stand by as an organisation. Proposition are the things that we do. Position is how we explain ourselves. And purpose is that one-liner. So for example, if you meet someone in an elevator, someone says, "What do you do?" That's our purpose. Someone shows a bit of interest, go, "Oh, well, here you go, this is our position." Go, "Oh, right, okay, now I get it. So what might that look like for me with a business like this?" Well, we would do these things, and these things. So you can start to see the messaging ladder develop as we go through purpose, position, proposition, and the principles are the things that you need to demonstrate on a daily basis. What we can then start to build is, we know who we are, we know our identity, we can work out what we want to sell. So I usually work to these three swim lanes. Gateway products are things that you can sell quickly, easily, at a relatively low value. They should be high margin, but they should be easy to sell. Get your foot in the door with a client with something that's easy to sell. And then we have the ladder. All of the gateway products that we have will then logically start to connect to other parts of our offering. Core products are things that we would sell every day. It's a natural transition from gateways into core products. Then again, logically from core to premium as we start to develop those account relationships as well. And also we can then start to subdivide these into disciplines within the organisation as well. So we've got a really clear view of exactly what it is we do. Once we understand what it is who we are, what it is we sell, what we're representing, the problems that we're solving, we can start to talk about go-to-market. And go-to-market strategy is about combining, what may be a slightly tarnished word in sales and maybe a slightly misunderstood word in marketing, and bringing those two things together under one roof, which is about growth. Growth through go-to-market. Everything is revenue orientated, everything is actionable, and everything that we're doing should drive awareness, which then ultimately comes back to revenue on the table. First things first, themes and enablers. The themes, well, we've already got distilled down from our value proposition, so they're already set. But enablers on the right-hand side are things that allow us to enable those deals, enable those themes. They may be cultural, they may be process orientated, they may be IP orientated, they may be creatively orientated, they may be technology orientated. All of these things will allow us to start to beat down against those themes and help people understand what it is that we're going to do and how we're going to add value more proactively. Once we know the enablers, we can then start to look at the actual sectors we're going to go after. Always look at the sectors that you have in the business to start with, but also have the ambition to start to build out into new sectors as well. And we can start to then subdivide this into the subsectors. So medical, for example, is quite a long list of subsectors. And we can then start to get incredibly targeted as we start to build this into our campaign model. Before we do the campaign model, what we do need to understand is where our revenue is going to come from. So before we get out into market, we need to start mapping exactly where our revenue is going to come from and go, what does existing business look like? What does new business look like? How do each of those sectors break down into very sensible targets in their own right? And how do each of those targets then break down into the product offerings that we're going to sell? Effectively trying to simplify the job. So if someone says, I want to grow a business that's got £1 million of the revenue, it sounds like a bold number, especially if you're turning over 350k now. How do you do that? How do you atomize the sales job? And that's about breaking it down to the lowest common denominator. Because it may be that you're only 20 odd deals away from growth. And actually, if you start to think about it as 20 deals, it starts to become a much more manageable task. But when we do know where we're going, we can then start to plan out what our campaigns look like. We can then start to map sectors against our themes. We can build the campaign flow. And then we can start to truly understand what it is that we're trying to do. We get laser targeted with our population, bring in information from sources like Sales Navigator. We can start to create content. We can start to get targeted with the actual messaging that we're going to deliver. And you can then start to create a much more proactive awareness campaign that all ladders all the way through all of our key touch points and problem solving activities, all the way up to our value proposition, which, as we know, is founded in market problems. So the problems that other people have, not the solutions that we think that we want to give. And then we have a variety of different tactics. So, LinkedIn we have at our disposal. Social, paid advertising. I'm a huge fan of content marketing and being an authority in our subject matter and building that authority, which allows people to come to us. You can create your own events, which is obviously more preferable now, and certainly in a digital environment when the physical events are few and far between. We need to look at retargeting. We need to think about direct sales. People shouldn't be afraid to pick up the phone. Harder to get telephone numbers right now, but what we want to be trying to drive is conversation, trying to drive relationship off the back of all of these different touch points. We want to look at different advertising opportunities. There are lots of digital networking opportunities out there, and there are still some great digital events, especially like the Growth Festival. Data is going to be key, and processing that data, linking it with retargeting, linking it with social, paid, LinkedIn, is going to be absolutely paramount to making sure that we can create some really concise data in CRM, and then start to build that into our content marketing program, and the whole thing starts to sing together. And lastly, don't be afraid of ambassadors. Build a referral network, build a referral strategy, and ensure that you've got people out representing your business beyond those that just sit on the payroll. And then finally, we need to understand how this is all going to work through sales ops. So firstly, we need to have a look at a RACI model. So who's responsible, who's accountable, who's just influencing, or who's actually shouldn't be involved at all. And it's always good to make sure that we're telling people what they don't do, like the boundary mapping, as much as what we want people to do. And this RACI model allows us to identify gaps where we need to start to bring in additional resources. And through that mapping, we can then start to build our sales ops model to understand who touches what and where in the pipeline and where the overlaps are. And creating this clarity in the business is going to make a much more effective sales engine and make sure that as we're starting to build an engine that generates leads, we've actually got an operation that can close those leads as well. That's new business. Existing business, it is 10 times harder to keep selling to new clients than it is to an existing client. We need to protect the relationships that we have in the business today, because they're the ones that are going to give us the foundation and the gradual ladder to keep building on top of. And for me, there's kind of three main buckets here. We've got account plans, specific growth initiatives, and also specific retention strategies to make sure you keep clients. And the one thing I'm asked all the time is, how do I build a proactive pitch? How do we build something that we can proactively take to a client that allows us to shift the mindset of a business, open a client up, jump into new relationships, and start to broaden out, the way that we're perceived, and also scale up what we've already got. And by following a model of proactive pitching, we can understand what the problem is, do some needs analysis, we can form opinions, we can come up with creative ideas, build a storyline, build a pitch, and go out and pitch it. You also don't have to just then pitch that to that one client, because if you work with a client in media, the problems are probably going to be similar in some of their competitors. So it not only forms an account development asset, but it could also form a very useful new business asset as well. But from a planning perspective, there's some things that we need to look at. Let's do a proper mapping exercise. Who are we talking to? Who do we know of but aren't connected to? Who sits in different roles across the organisation that we should know, but we've just got no idea who they are? Ask for feedback. Do a net promoter score, for example. Just do some one-to-one. Get an external person to come and talk to your clients. Get the insights so you can start to work on how to maintain and improve that relationship. Build some strategic alignment. Understand what their business strategy is and bring that strategy that you have to them so you can understand where the middle ground is, so you can position yourself as a better partner. Have a look at divisions and departments. People talk about farming with an existing client and hunting for new business, but there's also something in the middle, which I call field hopping. So you've got an existing client, and actually you may be relatively siloed in terms of the way that they perceive you, but there's an adjacent department that is completely separate but needs your help, especially so when you've got large global clients. So do that jump. Try and do that internally, because it's going to be an easier job than trying to generate new business. Set new goals. Make sure you've got some clear targets and make it accountable. And importantly, just be really human and ask people for introductions. If you've got the good enough relationship with a client, you should be able to build that relationship. But then what can we do from a growth initiative perspective? Innovation, or innovating on your proposition, or innovating on their proposition, is always going to be a really simple way for you to have new conversations. Also, if you add a new offering or new service line to your business, be proactive and take it to them. Even take it to the client before you even launch it to see whether you can get some feedback. Be insights led. Add value all the time. Give. Do some analysis. Do some research. Set up a town hall and tell them what's going on in the competitive landscape, even if they haven't asked for it. Organise events. Bring them into your event. Try and go to their events, but try and build events around them as well. And on the back of the new offering piece, you can also do service sampling. So whether it's a new line or an existing line, why don't you just do something very small and simple for free? And if all else fails, it might be time for a change of guard. And maybe you want to try and swap out some people and try and stimulate the relationship with some new faces and some new conversation. And then finally, retention. It's one thing developing it, but obviously we need to make sure that we're keeping clients as well. Deliver quality. If you're delivering quality, at least they've got nothing to argue against. Customer service. Over service a client in terms of the relationship, communication, transparency. Make sure that you're there and present all the time. Find reasons to talk to them. Satisfaction. You may be delivering quality work, you may be talking to them, but are they even happy with you? So we need to make sure that they are happy, and again, that might mean that you want to try and look at the team that you're fielding. Try and understand if your client's looking for fame. Are they on a career trajectory themselves and they need to build their profile? And always look for that value add opportunity. Even if it doesn't necessarily result in revenue, always try to be in that kind of art of giving mode. And then especially when it comes to early access to insights or services, we can then start to build that into the comms model as well. Culture and attitude. Behind the mechanics of growth, culture and attitude are incredibly important. It's not just your mindset, it's the mindset of the team that you're trying to work with as well. And by building a culture that allows for failure, it allows for things to go wrong, it allows for the path not to be necessarily straight, it can be a windy one, it means that you and the team can focus on the things that matter. And by building these guardrails in, it means you can have a more productive and constructive business. And the way that I frame this are around shared goals, autonomy, and empowerment. And these are things that I've built businesses on, and I've found them incredibly successful. So from a shared goal perspective, does the team genuinely understand the vision? A lot of founders and business leaders think they've communicated it, but it's still trapped in their head. So try and expose that to the team, get their input, get their buy-in, and make sure that it becomes a conversation rather than a prescription to actually what they're going to do. Get them to contribute, silo off certain parts of the strategy and see whether they can edit that as well. But also make sure that the clarity is there. So can they present the strategy back to you to make sure that you've generally got the buy-in? From an autonomy perspective, making sure that you have a model that allows your team to go off and do what they need to do without too much of an impact on your time and micromanagement is going to deliver success no matter what. Now, I've found building guardrails is a really important way to do that. It's not a rule book. It's not a do this, or an if this, then that. It's about a high level understanding of what's right and wrong and what the direction of the business is and what we'll allow as an affordance model for things to go right or wrong. That, combined with the decentralization of power, doesn't mean that leaders and founders are going to be powerless, but what you're doing is you're allowing the team to be more autonomous within their business units and go off against the guardrails and try and drive the business forward. Lean reporting is important. Don't over-report. Try not to create ridiculous board packs. Try and create as lean as possible while still documenting things. And from experience, what I've seen is you can get some very interesting reporting models where it's much more graphically based. That allows you to build out your reporting model in a much more kind of productive way. And finally, it's about belief. If you don't believe in your team, then they shouldn't be part of your team, because you've got to believe and you've got to trust in the fact that they're going to do the right thing to grow the business. And then we have culture and attitude, and this really kind of gets summed up around empowerment. And with the opportunity to empower, you need to give people the ability to fail. You need to give them the opportunity to make decisions, and you have to not be a micromanager. You need to be a macro manager, and then just ensure that you are giving them the keys to the kingdom to make sure that they can drive these things forward with the right checks and balances. But from a leader perspective, that only comes with trust. And if you give them this without the trust, then again, it's not going to work. So it is a leap of faith in some respects to make sure that business leaders can hand this over to their team to try and drive the business forward. And then we have the growth mindset. And just to wrap up, as I said, if we don't aim high, no one's going anywhere. Have some ambition. Make sure it's realistic and accountable, but aim high. If you're not bold, then why bother? Just start. Lots of businesses get overly obsessed with too much strategy, too much thinking, too much pondering. Just start. Take an iterative process. Build the business story iteratively, and just take those first few steps on that journey. Resiliency is incredibly important, because you're probably going to get more failures than you will wins and along the journey. And the trick is just to keep going and just ensure that you're resilient, your mental health is in check, and you can be strong to ensure that you're dedicated and focused on trying to drive through the hard times like we're all experiencing right now. Don't sell is a huge kind of ethos of mine. You don't need that next deal. Don't chase it too hard. If you've got a broad enough and deep enough pipeline, then you don't need to be too fixated on every single deal. The other thing as well is just make sure that you just slow things down a little bit. And, some of the best deals that I've ever won have taken years and years to come to fruition. So, step back and let these things happen organically. Easy said when you've got a big, bold pipeline. Much more difficult if you've got a thin pipeline, but if you apply the go-to-market strategy and value proposition frameworks right, then you can certainly build a stronger pipeline off the back of it. Be nice. Life's too short. Don't be a wanker. Everyone wants to work with people who they want to work with. If you're hard to work with, or just seem to be having a bad day all the time, people aren't going to want to work with you. Be nice. Everyone's human. Everyone's going through their own shit. So, try and be a good person and a good global citizen. And then the last thing is be generous. I think the art of reciprocity and the art of giving, is really underserved in the agency climate. And I actually think that if we learn to try and give someone something without the expectation of getting, just because it's the right thing to do, or you feel you can just add some value to that person, the universe will pay back. And I have been a strong believer in all of the businesses that I've worked in, and that's been a key part of its growth. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope some of this has been useful. I'd absolutely be delighted to connect with you on LinkedIn or answer any of the further questions you may have. And best of luck out there.